Now, look, for years, Drake wasn't just an artist, he was the sound of an entire era. The playlists, the parties, the late night drives, the club records, the Instagram captions. I know y'all remember them Instagram captions, and the algorithm itself. Drake mastered a form of music that could exist everywhere at once. Music designed less to challenge you and more to keep the vibe going. And for over a decade, it worked better than anything we could have ever imagined in hip hop. But after Iceman, I think something changed. Not just with Drake, but with the culture. Because despite years of buildup, massive marketing, huge budget, social media campaigns, an entire machine designed to make this album feel unavoidable, the response felt different. It was kind of crickets. It was people more focused on numbers and less emotional, less about really the art itself. And that's why I keep thinking about that line from Kendrick Lamar about watching the party die. At first, people thought Kendrick was just talking about Drake. But what if he was talking about an entire cultural era? Because if Drake, the face of streaming, dominance, and modern vibe culture, can't create the same excitement anymore, maybe really we are watching the party die. And honestly, that might not be a bad thing. One thing I think people misunderstand about Drake is that he never was just a rapper. Drake was infrastructure. And for over a decade, the music industry practically reorganized itself around the type of artist he had become. Everything became faster, more accessible, more focused on playlist friendly, algorithmic type mood and messaging. And let's be clear, this isn't saying that Drake ruined the music because every era creates the art it emotionally needs. People wanted music that helped them to disconnect, music that could soundtrack everything without demanding too much emotionally. That's why artists like Future, Young Thug, and Drake himself became super popular. They became influential because they mastered the atmosphere, the vibe around the product. And Drake perfected that music that asks nothing from you except for your participation. You don't have to deeply analyze it. You didn't have to sit with it and let it marinate. You just had to feel it. And again, that worked until now. And you might be asking yourself, what made Iceman so interesting and so different? To me, it isn't really the sales themselves because Drake still sells more than most artists, right? But the important part is this: the machine worked exactly the way it always had, but the emotional response wasn't the same. This was a massive rollout, years of teasing, huge promos, citywide marketing in Toronto. I mean, that dude took over the city with that big old ice blocks, expensive activations. We have what was that? The seeing tower he had dripped out in ice. There was constant online conversations, the type of rollout only a handful of artists on earth could even afford to have. And yet, somehow, the album still didn't feel culturally undeniable. And that's new. Because for most of Drake's career, the hype itself became part of the experience. Even people who didn't like Drake still felt forced to participate in the moment. But with Iceman, I noticed something weird happening. People weren't just vibing anymore, they were analyzing. Even Drake fans started breaking down bars, questioning themes, discussing direction, asking what the album actually meant. And that might sound small, but culturally, that's a huge shift because audience are starting to want more from the art than just escapism. I think a lot of this shifting happening because of the world itself is kind of like in a different space now. People are tired. economically, emotionally, spiritually. There's a growing distrust toward celebrity culture, toward manufacturer moments, toward fake engagement. People are starting to feel when things feel engineered now. And when life becomes unstable, audiences usually start looking for meaning again. That's why I think we're seeing the rise of longer conversations, cultural analysis, video essays, shout out to FD Signifier, identity discussions, community based platforms, and independent content creators. People want art that feels connected to something real, genuine, and authentic, not just optimized. And what's interesting is that even music fans are becoming more reflective. The audience that once cared only about the slaps is now asking, what does this represent? What does the art stand for? What does this say about our culture? That's a completely different type of engagement. The party isn't disappearing entirely. People still want to have fun, y'all. People still want to party. They still want to escape. But escapism alone doesn't feel emotionally sufficient anymore. And honestly, I think that creates space for something new. What if we're entering a new Black cultural era, not identical to like the Harlem Renaissance, but spiritually connected to it? Because historically, some of the greatest periods of Black creativity happened during struggle, during instability, during uncertainty, during moments where people were forced to redefine themselves culturally. The Harlem Renaissance happened during economic hardship. And yet, Black artists created literature, music, philosophy, fashion, and art that still shapes culture today. And now I look around and I see another shift happening. People are becoming more interested in cultural identity, ownership, regional culture, Black history, independent media, community ecosystems, intentional creativity. Even conversations around movements like FBA show that people are searching for cultural definitions again. Whether people agree with these movements or not, the bigger point is this: people are trying to understand who they are again. And when communities again start seriously asking about identity questions, art changes, culture changes, the audience changes. So, no, I don't think Drake's Iceman is important because it flopped. All right. I think it's important because it feels like one of the first moments where the machine couldn't fully manufacture cultural energy anymore. And if that's true, then maybe Kendrick was right. Maybe we really are watching the party die. But every ending creates space for something else. And maybe what comes next won't just be bigger than numbers or bigger rollouts or more playlist domination. Maybe what comes next will be culture that wants death again, right? A culture that wants meaning again. A culture that wants to create things that actually last. If you like this video, you'll most certainly like this one. And until next time, stay beautiful, stay blessed, stay Black. This is Jade, and you're watching Get Into the Black. Bye bye.